And the Oscar goes to Michael B. Jordan.
He walked into the Oscars as the frontrunner. His film had 9 nominations. The Golden Globe was on his shelf. The Critics' Choice Award was on his shelf. His co-star had already bet $1,000 on him winning. And when the envelope opened and Michael B. Jordan's name came out instead, the internet immediately divided into 2 camps, one saying he was robbed and one saying he got exactly what his campaign deserved. Both camps are partly right. Both camps are missing something. Here is every theory, tested against the actual facts one by one. Everything in this video is drawn entirely from verified reporting by Variety, Newsweek, /Film, The Ringer, IB Times UK, Forbes, Yahoo Entertainment, and The Hollywood Reporter, all published between March 15th and March 22nd, 2026. All Academy voter quotes are drawn from named publications and attributed correctly. We are not taking sides. We are going through every theory, the ones that are true, the ones that are partly true, and the ones that simply do not hold up to the facts, so you can form your own informed view. Let's start with the most widely shared explanation, because it is also the least accurate, and being precise about why it is inaccurate matters before we can talk about what actually happened. The ballet and opera comments. If you have spent any time online since March 15th, you have seen this presented as the explanation for Timothée Chalamet's Oscar loss. He said no one cares about ballet and opera anymore during a Variety and CNN town hall with Matthew McConaughey. The arts community reacted. Misty Copeland responded. Andrea Bocelli responded. The Metropolitan Opera clapped back. The Royal Ballet extended what multiple outlets described as an icy invitation. Saturday Night Live roasted him on Weekend Update. Conan O'Brien used him as the first punchline of the Oscars ceremony. The narrative was clean. Actor says something dismissive, arts community revolts, voters punish him, he loses. There is one significant problem with this narrative. Oscar voting for the 98th Academy Awards closed on March 5th, 2026, at 5 p.m. Pacific Time. The Chalamet clip did not start gaining serious traction until late that same day, exploding across social media throughout the weekend of March 6th and 7th. By the time opera houses were posting snarky Instagram responses and ballet dancers were making TikToks, all 10,000-plus Academy ballots had been submitted, tabulated by PricewaterhouseCoopers, and legally sealed. Walter Nicoletti, founder and CEO of film production and distribution firm Voce Spettacolo, told Newsweek that the most widely shared explanation for Chalamet's loss does not even match the awards season calendar. He said Oscar voting closed on March 5th, 2026 at 5 p.m. and the clip of his comments didn't go viral until the evening of March 5th and throughout that weekend. That distinction matters because it reframes what has become Chalamet's third Best Actor loss not as a self-inflicted wound but as a more complicated collision of timing and taste. Kevin O'Leary, Chalamet's co-star from Marty Supreme, made the same point on the Oscar red carpet before the results were announced. O'Leary told CNN that he had just put $1,000 on Chalamet to win because the voting had stopped long before the controversy happened. He was not wrong about the timeline. He was wrong about the outcome. But the timeline point stands. The ballet story did not cost Chalamet Oscar votes in any measurable, direct way. It cost him something else, which we will get to. But the simple version, comments go viral, voters punish him, is not supported by the chronology. So if it was not the ballet comments, what actually happened? The answer is layered, and each layer deserves honest attention. Layer 1 is what happened in the precursor races, the awards that come before the Oscars and function as the clearest signal of where Academy sentiment is actually landing. Truth is, Chalamet's path to the Oscar began to crack well before anyone was talking about Swan Lake. At the BAFTAs, he lost in a major upset to Robert Aramayo for I Swear. Then came the seismic moment at the Actor Awards on March 1st, 4 days before voting closed, when Michael B. Jordan burst into the scene to rapturous applause. That Actor Awards win on March 1st, the ceremony formerly known as the SAG Awards, is the most important single moment in this entire timeline, and it received a fraction of the coverage that the ballet controversy did. By the time final voting opened, the race had already shifted. Jordan Sinner's performance, a dual role as twin brothers in Ryan Coogler's horror drama, had been building momentum throughout awards season. When Jordan walked to the stage at the Actor Awards, surrounded by his peers, fellow actors, the people who know what it actually takes to do the work he did in Sinners, the room responded in a way that told you something real. These were the professional craftspeople of the industry saying, "This is the performance that moved us most. That is not a meaningless signal. It is the most important signal in the race, and it broke hard in Jordan's direction 4 days before the ballots closed. Layer 2 is the character problem. Slash Film raised it in a post-ceremony analysis that became one of the most widely read pieces of awards writing from that week. The majority of Best Actor winners earned their awards for playing people who were either decent folk or capable of atoning for their sins to become genuinely good people. Regardless of Chalamet's awesome talent, how could such a self-serving jackass who ruins numerous lives in his pursuit of table tennis immortality propel the star to his first Oscar? That is a blunt way of saying something real. The Academy, for all its complexity and contradictions, tends to reward characters whose arcs contain some version of redemption or decency or human cost that the audience can feel alongside them. Marty Mauser is not that character. He is electric. He is watchable. He is one of the most specific and committed characterizations Chalamet has put on screen, but he is also, as Slash Film puts it, a man who ruins lives in the obsessive service of his own ambition without meaningful reckoning. That creates a particular kind of ceiling for award sympathy that even the most extraordinary performance has trouble breaking through. Layer 3 is the persona problem, and this is where the ballet comments do matter, just not in the direct way most coverage suggested. If you want to focus on Chalamet's campaign strategy, his big mistake was seemingly adopting Marty Mauser's persona while promoting the film. Prior to Marty Supreme, Chalamet had come off as a confident but relatively grounded guy. He didn't come off as conceited or arrogant in interviews and projected normal dude vibes when he sat courtside to watch his New York Knicks. He was anything but press shy, but never felt overexposed or desperate for attention. He was a movie star enjoying the ride on the cusp of his 30s. A different Chalamet showed up to sell Marty Supreme. He was brash and obnoxious to the point that some theorized he was making the press rounds in character as Marty Mauser. The specific incident Slash Film highlighted was a quote from December when Chalamet told a journalist, "It's been like 7-8 years that I feel like I've been handing in really committed top-of-the-line performances. This is really some top-level shit." That quote circulated. It was received by a portion of the industry and the press as self-aggrandizement, the kind of statement that a 30-year-old makes when he has started to believe his own campaign materials. The Ringer's analysis put it directly. It was not in spite of his dogged pursuit of greatness that Timmy lost the Oscar. It was probably, at least in part, because of it. The Ringer also drew the sports comparison that Chalamet himself invited. He told Carmelo Anthony on a podcast in December, when someone's the MVP or a finals champion, it's indisputable. These guys, it's like a different mentality to be athletically gifted, and it's not subjective, like you average 28 points. You know that for a fact. Acting is still subjective. The barely concealed frustration in that statement is real and understandable. He wanted the validation to be as clear and indisputable as a box score. But the Oscar face-off is a political one, not a competition won by sheer brute force. If anything, the long standoff between a striving actor and the Academy is a lot more like a sports movie than an actual game, following predictable narrative beats and putting young actors through their paces. Layer 4 is the Kylie Jenner factor, which is the theory that deserves the most careful handling because it involves real people's real relationship and because the evidence for it is thinner than its prominence in the conversation suggests. Walter Nicoletti of Voce Spettacolo told Newsweek that the prestige of his performance had been toned down by the constant presence of his girlfriend, and that this particular situation made him feel more like a celebrity than a craftsman in the eyes of the old guard of the Academy members. He compared it to Leonardo DiCaprio, who was alone on the red carpet this year because, as Nicoletti described it, that is a strategic image management choice in the entertainment industry. One Academy voter told Newsweek directly, "Having seen most of the Oscar performances for Best Actor, I do believe Timothée Chalamet was robbed, maybe even because of his girlfriend." That is a real quote, from a real voter, in a real publication. It deserves to be taken seriously, without being treated as definitive, because one voter's perception is not a consensus, and the idea that a relationship should affect an artistic award is itself something worth examining, rather than simply accepting. But the perception existed, it was documented, and the point about celebrity visibility versus craftsman visibility, about what happens when the tabloid story around a performance becomes bigger than the performance itself, is a legitimate industry critique regardless of how you feel about Kylie Jenner personally. The same Newsweek analysis offered the clearest counter-argument. This third consecutive loss prevents Chalamet from becoming the kid who got everything too soon. So, he lost because he ran a perfect campaign in a year where the Academy decided they preferred the electric energy of Michael B. Jordan over the brilliance of a young king. Layer 5 is perhaps the most uncomfortable one for the robbed narrative. the actual competitive quality of the field. It needs to be said plainly. Timothée Chalamet, Michael B. Jordan, Leonardo DiCaprio, Wagner Moura, and Ethan Hawke were all richly deserving of the top prize. It was the kind of murderer's row lineup where the last performance you watched before voting could very well be your top choice. This was not a year where an obvious choice was overlooked in favor of a lesser one. This was a year where 5 genuinely exceptional performances competed for one award and one of them had to not win. Michael B. Jordan won because enough people in the Academy thought he gave the better performance. Everything else is noise. That last sentence, from IB Times UK's post-ceremony analysis, is probably the most accurate single sentence written about this race. It does not mean Chalamet's performance was lesser. It means Jordan's was, by the collective judgment of the people who voted, the one that moved them most, and Jordan's performance in Sinners, playing 2 entirely distinct twin brothers across a horror film set in the Jim Crow South, differentiating them through posture and stillness and specific emotional registers, without ever relying on visual tricks to tell them apart, was a staggering piece of technical and emotional work. The standing ovation when his name was read was not the room feeling obligated to be polite. It was people recognizing a performance that had genuinely affected them. So was Chalamet robbed? Here is the honest, complete answer. He gave a performance that in most other years of the last decade would have won. He ran a campaign that, by the evidence of the precursor wins, started too hot, peaked too early, and made the work feel secondary to the persona. He made a comment that, while it did not affect ballots directly, contributed to a shift in the narrative around him at the precise moment when narrative is most consequential. He had a relationship that some voters apparently perceived as moving him from the category of serious craftsman into the category of tabloid celebrity, and he faced a competitor who won the actor awards 4 days before voting closed, generating momentum that carried the exact weight that kind of momentum carries in this ecosystem. None of those things add up to robbery. They add up to a legitimate loss in a genuinely competitive race in a year when the Academy made a choice that was defensible in every respect. The Marty Supreme performance deserved recognition. It received 3 nominations: Best Actor, Best Picture, Best Director, and 0 wins from 9 total nominations. That outcome, like the fate of American Hustle and The Irishman and Up in the Air before it, will become a footnote in the history of the film rather than in the history of Chalamet's career. Because the history of his career is still being written. At 30 years old, he has been nominated for Best Actor 3 times. Only one Best Actor winner has been younger than 30, Adrian Brody, who got his first statuette at 29 for The Pianist. Leonardo DiCaprio, whom Chalamet's clearly modeling his career after, didn't win until he was 41. Al Pacino didn't win until Scent of a Woman when he was 52. Henry Fonda didn't get his Oscar until he was 76 for On Golden Pond. The overdue Best Actor Oscar is a long-running rite of passage right up there with awarding actors who can manage to enunciate through a mouthful of fake teeth. The Academy's relationship with the young frontrunner is not a neutral one. It leans instinctively toward the overdue, toward the patient, toward the person who has waited and let the work speak across decades. Chalamet has been working for less than a decade at the level where Best Actor nominations happen. His waiting period by industry standards has barely begun. The 4th nomination is coming. The film and the performance and the year in which all of those things align properly will eventually arrive. When they do, the story of March 2026 will not be the story of the robbery. It will be the story of the lesson that had to be learned before the moment was ready. Here is the final honest assessment. The word robbed implies that something was taken from someone who deserved it. And the problem with applying that word to this situation is that Michael B. Jordan also deserved it. That his 15 years of building toward this moment, his dual performance in Sinners, his genuine emotion when the name was announced, the standing ovation from a room full of peers. All of that was not incidental. It was the result of a performance that the Academy found more compelling in this particular year, with this particular field, in this particular cultural moment. Chalamet was not robbed. He was outrun on the inside by someone he had not taken seriously enough as a threat until the Actor Awards on March 1st made the danger undeniable. He was undercut by a campaign that started to blur the line between the actor and the character he was playing. He was touched, tangentially, by a perception problem that had real voters naming his girlfriend as a factor. And he was entered in a year when the historical precedent for his age and his narrative, the young king demanding his crown before the Academy was ready to hand it over, works against him almost regardless of the quality of the work. None of that means he will not win. None of that means he should walk away from the ambition. It means the path is longer than he thought and that the path is asking him to be more patient and less visible and more willing to let the work lead than the campaign. That is a difficult lesson. But the actors who eventually win after multiple losses almost always credit the losing years as the ones where they learned the most. The Oscar is coming, just not yet. If this kind of complete, honest, fully sourced breakdown of a complicated story is what brings you here, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and leave a comment below. Tell me whether you think Chalamet was robbed. Tell me whether Michael B. Jordan was your pick. Tell me whether you think the campaign hurt him or whether the performance was simply the second best performance in a field that was genuinely exceptional from top to bottom. I read every single comment. I will see you in the next one.